Hi, I'm Michelle Chalfant, psychotherapist, holistic life coach, and human just like you, learning to navigate life's challenges. With over 25 years experience, I teach people how to get healthy using the adult chair model. The adult chair model is where simple psychology meets grounded spirituality, and it teaches us how to become healthy adults. From anxiety and depression to codependency and relationship issues, you can use the adult chair for just about anything. Each week, I share practical tips, tools, and advice from myself and a wide range of experts on how to get unstuck, how to live authentically, and how to truly love yourself, all while sitting in your adult chair. Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. Welcome, Dr. Dave Rabin, to the Adult Chair Podcast. I just have to say, so absolutely excited to have you on the show today. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. I'm so excited to have you. I said to you before, I'm so excited I have this time with you because we get to open up a whole can of worms in a good way, in a really good way, because you're a wealth of information about this stuff. So I want to talk to you about 100 things, but I'm going to narrow it way down. You have so much knowledge about stress, PTSD, trauma, all of it, and what's happening in our world right now as far as the advancements with treating all of these. So why don't we start right there? Tell us about what's happening in the world, because I've been a therapist for 25 years and I don't obviously prescribe meds. Some of my clients have gone to get meds over the years, but typically what I hear is, yeah, I kind of feel numb, or they don't work anymore, and da-da-da-da-da. But what's the buzz now that's going on in the world is, therapy assisted, using plant-based medicine. Different things are happening, and it's going to be legal, within a year. Is that true, or are there states where it's already legal?
You're referring to psychedelic assisted psychotherapy?
Yes.
So ketamine is actually the only legal psychedelic currently, and it's legal in every state and in almost every country of the world.
Wow.
Because it was originally developed as an anesthetic. So it's a very interesting medicine that we currently use legally now for depression and PTSD and some anxiety disorders.
Okay.
The medicines that are on the verge of legality that are currently in FDA phase 3 trials sponsored by MAPS and others that are going extraordinarily well are with breakthrough status, I should add, because they're so promising, are MDMA, or 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine, which is an amphetamine family compound that selectively and fairly radically enhances our feelings of empathy, self-acceptance, radical non-judgment, radical self-love, things of that nature.
Wow. Wait, that is not MDMA. I thought that was MDMA.
That is
MDMA. Okay, gotcha. Go ahead.
And then also psilocybin has breakthrough status with the FDA right now for treatment-resistant depression.
Yeah.
So those are the two that I would say are on the horizon to come out shortly in the next few years.
I'm so excited about it because I actually know people that have use these, and I'm going to say they very much respect these. This is not like a party drug that they're doing. Like, this is with the help of a therapist or with the help of a doctor or in like a beautiful ceremony. And I myself have not done this yet. I've been tempted, but I'm gaining more information. But yeah, the people that I know that have done the MDMA, when I think about attachment theory and, like you said, self-love, I said, oh my gosh, it just totally opens the heart and rewires the brain. Like, it's absolutely crazy what's happening with people. And psilocybin, I saw that special, I'm sure you saw it, on 60 Minutes. Was it like a year ago where they did the psilocybin study right on 60 Minutes? And oh my goodness. I mean, the guy had 25 years of drinking, 25 vodkas a day. He did one session with psilocybin and was over. So tell us, because my audience, I don't know in my audience who exactly would know about this, but being a therapist, I know a lot about this. And again, friends of mine are starting to talk about it, but help people to understand, like, what's happening in our world, and should they be scared? Are these drugs going to be, once they're legalized, is it going to, because these were legal in the 70s, correct? So what's
Yeah.
going to change now? Like, is this a good thing? Like, tell us about some of the studies that you actually have been involved with or know about.
Sure. Happy to. There is an incredible amount of misinformation about these medicines out there. So I really appreciate the opportunity to provide the knowledge to your audience.
Yeah.
And there's so much incredible work going on. I think the first thing to understand about psychedelic medicine is really, what does the term psychedelic mean?
Mm.
So a lot of people hear that word and they think, crazy 70s dance party or party of some sort, Burning Man, right? All these other words come into our consciousness, and that's unfortunate. It has, because the real meaning of the term is mind manifesting. And so what that refers to is actually, going back to the Freudian psychoanalytic or the Jungian psychoanalytic understanding of consciousness. We have things that are within our typical level of awareness that we call conscious experiences. And we're aware of these things when they happen, like the conversation that we're having right now. We're both acutely aware of each other and the backgrounds in our rooms and these things. But then, there's also other things going on, like there's a rainstorm outside right now in front of me, but I'm not really aware of it because it's not something that I need to worry about. Right? It's not a threat to me at this moment. And so I'm able to focus my attention on our conversation, and everything else in the background kind of literally fades to the background, or what we call beneath awareness or subconscious. So there's a lot of things in our subconscious that we are not typically aware of. And, I think over the last 100 years, we've come to learn that perhaps most of our experience is actually recorded and stored in our subconscious rather than our awareness. Perhaps over 90% of things that are going on around us are things we're not actually aware of. And, what we do with psychedelic medicine and the way that they work is it allows us to have an opportunity to walk someone through starting to become aware of what's going on in the subconscious space, beneath our normal level of what we call default mode awareness. Default mode referring to the neural network that is involved in our ego. And then beneath that, when you dissolve the default mode network, which can be done with breath work or meditation or many yoga practices or soothing touch or music, but also psychedelic medicines chemically do this in a very rapid way. And what they catalyze this dissolution of what we call ego or default mode, and then makes all of this content that's stored in our beneath our awareness all of a sudden accessible. And so we can start to look at that stuff, that content, in an unbiased, again, non-judgmental way, and recognize that this is all part of us that we're kind of ignoring or leaving behind in the background. And then it gives us an opportunity to take some of that content and bring it forth into our conscious or aware state, right? So that is effectively the mind manifesting, is manifesting material from our subconscious or beneath awareness within our awareness. So that is the other idea that Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, talks about, is being able to do this with our dreams. Our dreams are beneath our conscious. And then when we take things from our dreams and bring them out into our day-to-day lives, we are manifesting content from our subconscious in our conscious. So these are very old concepts that have been around for a very long time, and in a large part stem all the way back into ancient plant and tribal medicine, Chinese medicine, Hindu yogic medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, etc. It's very interesting concepts that Western medicine has struggled to grasp over time.
Yeah. So true. Talk a little bit more, and I've heard you speak about this. Can you explain more about what the default mode network is? I love the ski example that you use, the snow skiing example. That's a beautiful example, I think, for people.
Yeah. So if you can imagine, our brains are, always talking to each other and talking to our bodies constantly all the time. And there's certain parts of our brains that are more active at a resting, regular, sober, state than others. And what we've found from functional neuroimaging, these live brain imaging studies, is that these networks that are existing when we're at rest are referred to as the default mode. So the default mode network just means these are the parts of the brain that are active when we're not doing anything else. And it turns out that these parts of the brain are particularly interesting because they tend to correlate with the feelings of ego or self-identity, right?
Okay.
So if you do something or think about something that is self-referential or referring to the self or our identity, for example, saying, I am a depressed person, or I am depressed, right? We now have associated the illness state or depression with our identity rather than saying, I feel sad or I feel depressed, which is more of a modification to the way that we feel right now in this moment, not the before, present, the past, present, and future of us, if that makes sense. So behaviors like that and ways we use language as one example start to associate these concepts of depression or sadness with our sense of self that then strengthens the connection or the default mode connection between our ego, our identity, our self, and preservation with the concept of depression, which couldn't be further from the truth of who we actually are. The depression is really a state of feeling. So if you can imagine skiing, in the skiing example, if I am skiing down a ski lift run that's called depression over and over and over again, right? And that run, every time I ski down it, I ski down the same tracks or almost the same tracks that either myself or someone else has taken before. We all know from this analogy, it's always easier to follow someone's tracks when they've already been laid.
Right.
But if you go up to the top of the mountain now and you imagine having, 8 feet of fresh powder fall on top of you, you no longer have the guides of the tracks that existed before to follow. You now have the opportunity to see the mountain for what it is and take any new path and make your own new path, which is effectively what happens when we engage in really incredible deep psychedelic experiences that are therapeutic, or when we're doing really deep psychotherapeutic work with a patient. What we're doing is we're changing their perception or offering them an opportunity to see themselves in a fresh way, as if they've had 8 feet of powder dropped on these old pathways, so that they don't have that frame of reference where they're going back to the same way of I am depressed, I am depressed. They start to recognize, wait a minute, maybe I just feel depressed right now, which means that I'm not actually a depressed person, but that I actually have the power to change the way I feel.
So the default mode network would be all of our neural pathways. Is that another way of saying it?
All of our neural pathways that are going on at rest, when we're in like a standard resting ego state that's focused really on survival.
Okay. So it's all in the ego. Okay. That makes sense.
It's mostly ego focused.
Because everyone's talking right now about the neural pathways. How do you change the neural pathways? You got to change the neural pathways. So is it possible, like you had said, like through therapy or meditation, but even like a practice of gratitude, would that be a way to change those pathways and the default mode?
Absolutely.
Network. Okay.
Absolutely. So practicing like the gratitude, forgiveness, self-love, compassion, all of these things are skills that literally shift our neural networks in our brains. It's difficult to show that in a study, but we know that these exercises, and similarly things like soothing human touch, soothing music, really good psychotherapy, eye-to-eye contact with someone who's non-judging of you and accepting of you in that moment, all of these things change the way that our brains talk to each other.
So what I'm going to make a wild guess that a daily practice of gratitude and therapy and soft touch and all of these things are wonderful, but they take a long time to change the neural pathways, correct? Versus,
they do take time. Yes.
Yeah. I don't how much time typically, like if I have a gratitude practice every day for 5 or 10 minutes, how long, because you study the brain, how long do you know, like how long would it typically take to see something start changing the brain?
I mean, if you're a follower of Malcolm Gladwell's work, or you follow some of this neural training work, it can take 5 to 10,000 hours to really make meaningful changes in your brain.
Okay.
I think the nice thing about gratitude, deep breathing, for example, requires a lot of work. Anyone who's tried it in meditation, it can require thousands of hours to become really good at entering one of those states in real time.
Yeah.
But gratitude, I would say, is nice because it's a little bit easier because you can take it with you wherever you go. Kind of like Apollo and the technology that we develop, right, brings you back to your body and you don't have to stop what you're doing to use it. Gratitude is kind of similar. Gratitude you can bring into any situation in your life, but you have to remember to tie it
To
in.
do
So
it.
that's the hard part of those techniques.
So of all this non-psychedelic ways to really change your brain, what would you say is the fastest way to change the brain of everything you know that's
Mm,
non-psychedelic?
that's a great question.
Or are they all
So,
kind of the same?
I mean, I would say that there are certain ways that are easier than others. So
Mm-hmm.
gratitude is one of the easiest ways because
Mm-hmm.
it works so quickly to transform
Yeah.
what you might perceive as a negative experience into one that can be an experience of self-growth and healing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
So one of my favorite examples that comes up with literally all of my patients is anger management. Right. So
Mm.
oftentimes when we feel angry in a situation that we are told either in the present or the past, we're not supposed to be angry. We're not supposed to feel angry. What
Mm-hmm.
happens is we feel angry and then we turn that anger inward or we turn it on other people
Mm-hmm.
because we're told that we're not allowed to feel that way. So we
Mm-hmm.
can't, instead of just letting it out in a constructive way, we turn it inward, which is the most frequent way that we do it, and become angry at ourselves. We take it out on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so what the exercise that I think is really fun, that is something that talking about rewiring neural networks helps very quickly, is when people start to feel angry, what I say is the first thing you should do is accept that you feel angry and recognize it and
Mm-hmm.
admit that it's okay to be angry. And then try your best to express gratitude for that anger. And when you express gratitude for the anger, it helps us to understand that that anger is not our enemy. That anger
Mm.
could be one of the most powerful sources of energy that we have to get us to do anything. But
Mm-hmm.
if we suppress it or reject it, it attacks us. It becomes perceived as negative or sort of this outside force that's controlling us. But really, when you recognize it with gratitude and you appreciate it, it allows us to understand, hey, wait, maybe this thing that I'm doing, or this situation that I'm putting myself in, is contributing to my anger, which I don't really want to
Mm.
feel. Let's
Mm-hmm.
try to use our brains to figure out ways that we can navigate this situation more effectively, and then channel that anger into a productive activity like working out or exercise or some kind of, you know, activity that really benefits us or helps us grow. And there are lots of different examples of that.
Great. What I have to ask you a question, because I do have people that will say to me things like, what do I do with my anger? How do I feel my anger? I know I'm angry, but I'm afraid of my anger.
Mhm.
What do you say to someone that would ask that question?
So I mean, I guess what I say is, that we have these feelings about our feelings,
Mm-hmm.
or these thoughts about our feelings, because we've been taught to think or feel that way, whether it's through people like our parents or our role models telling us, or from watching people on TV or in our communities act a certain way, that we internalize that growing up. And most of that internalization happens before we're really conscious of our environment. So,
Mm-hmm.
during the fundamental development of the emotional nervous system, which is between 0 and 4 years old, is when a lot of this entrainment happens. And so it's not our fault that we're afraid of our anger, and it's not our fault that we are rejecting of it or suppressing of it. That's what we've been taught to do. And so the process of self-healing is to accept and love and be grateful for all the parts of ourselves, even the parts, and especially the parts that we've been taught are not acceptable or not welcome. And when we welcome those parts in, what it does is it allows us pause, an opportunity to sort of
Mm-hmm.
take a step back and say, how can I work with this, not against it, but work with it to improve my life, right? Think
Mm-hmm.
about art. Artists and musicians are incredible at channeling anger into incredible works of art and music,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing how they're able to take sadness and negative, what we perceive as negative or unwelcome emotions, and turn them into great beauty.
Yeah. I say this all the time, like, anger's good. We want to feel our anger. There's power in that anger. It pushes us
Mm-hmm.
forward. It's a very, very healthy emotion. So thank you for that. Okay. So we talked about changing the neural network, or the default mode network, the slow way. Tell us what you have noticed and studied to be a faster way to do that.
So I think so. I think there's a lot of ways to rewire our brains, and I think
Mm-hmm.
going back to or to make our brains function more in line with our full potential,
Mm-hmm.
to reach our full potential as ourselves. And I think a lot of this work comes from Eric Kandel's work, who won the Nobel Prize in 2000 for discovering the mechanisms of learning and memory.
Mm-hmm.
And he really showed us that, if we don't take anything else away from his work, at least, for me, what I think the most important thing is that we form neural networks or wiring in our brains that are very, very old. And these
Mm-hmm.
networks, many of them, especially the networks of fear and safety, date back probably over 300 million years to ancient sea snails that only have 3 neurons in their whole bodies. So
Wow.
these are not uniquely human characteristics. They are characteristics that have been around for a very, very long time. And so thinking about it from that perspective, every single thing that comes into our lives from a context of fear will strengthen neural networks around fear and fear stress responses.
Mm-hmm.
Similar, everything that comes into our lives around feelings of safety and helps to boost safety increases the neural networks around safety responses.
Mm-hmm.
So things like trauma, for instance, that we consider to be trauma, which are one or multiple intensely powerful, meaningful negative events over time, will rapidly create neural networks around fear pathways that increase stress in our bodies. And we cope with that in lots of different ways. One of the ways that looks is depression. Another way is PTSD. Another way is
Mm-hmm.
metabolic disorder. There's lots of ways that looks, and those all have their neural networks that correlate. Similarly, very intense, meaningful, positive experiences like that with which you can get from great psychotherapy with a good therapist, or psychedelic medicine, which chemically catalyzes these very powerful healing states, like what happens with MDMA. These experiences seem to be able to reverse the neural networks that were wired towards negative or traumatic experiences very quickly. They don't
Wow.
do it alone. They do it very powerfully in conjunction with psychotherapy. They kind of catalyze the effect of psychotherapy on a much more rapid scale. We developed the Apollo wearable technology to provide some of that benefit of boosting safety responses in the body to, in a
Mm-hmm.
similar way, catalyze the healing responses and catalyze the ability for us to feel safe and to allow our recovery nervous system to be more stimulated and more effective in doing what it does, which is to heal ourselves. So the idea of psychedelic medicine, going back to what you were talking about earlier, I didn't really answer your question about, how these medicines work and why they're different. Is they're really a fundamentally different paradigm from Western medicine. Western medicine, especially in mental health, teaches that I, as the doctor, prescribe you one or multiple medicines to take one or multiple times a day, often indefinitely.
Right.
And so what it does is that in some ways facilitates a dependence on something outside of us to heal us. And
Mm-hmm.
what psychedelic medicine paradigm it does is it uses 1 to 6 doses, sometimes a few more, but
Mm-hmm.
not every day and not every week, once every, a few times a year at most. And in the case of MDMA, in the MAPS trial with PTSD, we're seeing that patients who have had treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress disorder for, on average, 17 years, 67% of them are no longer meeting diagnostic criteria for PTSD 5 years out.
Wow.
Just 3 doses of medicine.
Wow.
So and 12 weeks of psychotherapy, but 3
Wow.
12 weeks of psychotherapy,
And they've had it for 17 years.
for 17 years without sufficient symptom remission, and just 3 doses and 12 weeks of therapy are inducing rapid remission that lasts for 5 years in the majority of people. That is an incredible breakthrough.
Unbelievable.
It's the closest thing to a cure we've ever had in mental illness.
Wow.
So again, we don't know for sure if it
Yeah.
lasts forever, but we do know that it's teaching people to heal themselves, because after the treatment stops, something like 2 months out, 52% of people are no longer meeting diagnostic criteria. But 5 years out, 67% are no longer meeting diagnostic criteria. So people are continuing to get better without subsequent treatment, which goes directly against the current paradigm of Western medicine, which is
Yes.
we're taught to tell our patients, if you don't continue to take this medicine every day as prescribed, you will relapse, right? What message are we sending to people when we tell them that? It's not a message of self-healing. It's a message, you need us to make you better.
Oh my God, that's incredible though.
It's
3
incredible.
doses.
Yep.
That's just insane. And by the way,
and that's what got them breakthrough status with the FDA.
And by the way, what are the side effects?
So used in clinical settings, the side effects are very slim.
This is what I keep hearing. Like there's none to slim versus if you're taking like a Prozac or you're taking another med, you've got a list of symptoms like that go on, or excuse me, side effects that go on and on and on and on.
Right.
Crazy. Right. This is what I keep hearing from people. Like, I don't have any side effects and I've taken 2 doses, or I've taken this, my anxiety's gone. Tell us about anxiety, depression. Like, what are you learning about the treatment for that with psychedelic assisted therapies?
So I think what we're learning is very similar to what we're learning with PTSD. Mm-hmm. And we're learning the most from, the psilocybin, MDMA, and ketamine work. Yeah. But I think what's really interesting is it's reaffirming a lot of what we learn, or what was taught in psychoanalytic psychotherapy and psychodynamic psychotherapy, motivational interviewing, mm-hmm. right? Like the techniques that we use to guide people through these experiences are very similar to all of these different techniques we've used in psychotherapy without drugs for a very long time. And what I think that's really reaffirming to our model of consciousness and healing, right? Mm-hmm. I think the most interesting thing that it's teaching us is that we have the ability to make ourselves sick by changing the way we describe ourselves and the way we think about ourselves and the way we think about our lives. Similarly, we have an equal ability to make ourselves or help ourselves heal by changing the way we think about ourselves as agents of healing, with the ability born with us to heal ourselves and the ability to heal the people around us in our communities by healing ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's really what these medicines are showing us. And it's not selective to just anxiety, depression, or PTSD as described in the DSM. It's, really about what is at the core of all of these illnesses. Mm-hmm. It's trauma.
Yeah. Yes.
It's one or multiple negative, meaningful events that happen over time that are unresolved, that are unsupported, and frequently after the event, the people closest to us who we believe to trust or love tell us that it's our fault that this negative, traumatic thing happened to us. Yeah. And that is the greatest tragedy of all. We cannot stop stressful events from happening. They will always happen. But what we can do is prevent PTSD and mental illness by providing support to people who have gone through stress or trauma right afterwards from the moment that it happens without blame. Mm-hmm. And when we do that and provide that support, we will radically shift the ability of helping facilitate that healing process.
Wow. Beautiful. What would you say? Like, so how does a therapist determine, do I go, or not a therapist, but a layperson, let's say, how do I know, do I want to go for ketamine? Do I want to go for MDMA? Do I want to do psilocybin? So many people talk about going to wherever to do ayahuasca now too. I mean, this seems to be the buzz, at least, I don't know, in my world, a lot of people are talking about this right now. So where would someone go if they say, wow, I'm interested in learning more? As I'm a therapist, like I didn't know that I could even be using this with my clients. Like how do we know where to go?
That's a great question. So there aren't as many resources as there need to be. I'm working with some groups of folks to build better resources. Mm-hmm. Some of the places that you can go now, the places that are old are, the maps.org, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies that funds all of the research on, or most of the research on MDMA for PTSD. There are resources for many different psychedelic medicines on the third wave, and CBD or cannabinoids, I would consider part of this family of medicines. Their projectcbd.org is a great source for that. Okay. And there are lots of other resources coming up over time. Many university resources are out there that talk about this. Ketamine is the Ketamine Psychotherapy Associates is a wonderful resource, and the Ketamine Research Foundation, which are both founded by Phil Wolfson and others. Phil is a psychiatrist who practices still in the Bay Area, and we work together now very closely and to really spread accurate knowledge about how these treatments can be used. I think that the best way to understand what to go for is to understand that psychedelic medicines are not necessarily for everyone, but they do work very, very well for some people used in a reliable setting. Ketamine currently, as exciting as MDMA and ayahuasca and psilocybin and LSD and iboga and all these other medicines are, they're not legal in the US.
Yeah.
And so they're very difficult to access in reliable settings unless you're part of a clinical trial. So for example, if you want to be part of the Johns Hopkins clinical trial on psilocybin, you can go to their website and you can figure out how to sign up. Same with maps.org. You can go to their website and sign up to be a part of the MDMA trial, but it's very, very difficult to get in. They only have limited spots, et cetera, et cetera. You have to meet very strict criteria, and you might even have to move for 6 months to do the treatments. So that's not ideal for most people. That said, ketamine is legal in every state in the United States, and it can be now delivered safely over the internet. So we can mail ketamine to your home from a pharmacy, oral ketamine, and then you can take it in your mouth, and we can do sessions over Zoom. Because that medicine is so safe, and it only lasts for 1 to 2 hours at most for most people.
So talk to me about that's one I've heard of, but I don't know much about it. So since it's legal, let's talk about that. Why would someone take this? What are their symptoms? Are they anxious? Are they depressed? Again, is it trauma? What is it? What is it used for?
Ketamine is FDA approved for treatment-resistant depression.
Okay.
It is used also for PTSD and some anxiety disorders.
Okay.
It is an anesthetic. Traditionally, it was developed and used, I believe, as an anesthetic for in wartime, actually in Vietnam, to get soldiers out of the field. And it's also been used as an anesthetic in the operating rooms for many, many years. It's used in children. It's used in pregnant women. It's used in horses.
I was just going to say horses is what I had heard.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very safe medicine when used properly.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it is very apparent that many people do not know how to use this medicine properly. And so we recommend accessing the providers through reliable sources like the Ketamine Research Foundation and the Ketamine Psychotherapy Associates, because these groups have vetted a number of providers that can do the treatments reliably with psychotherapy. And so it involves a process that, you take the medicine and you dissolve the medicine in your mouth in the case of remote therapy. And then it takes about 20 minutes for it to kick in. The dosing is very gradual. We start very low and we can work our way up. And then it creates sort of a very much mind-opening sort of dissociative effect that is, in terms of the default mode network we were talking about earlier, these medicines rapidly dissolve that default mode network that is associated in our brains with the way that we typically see ourselves.
Wow.
And so it allows us to take a step back and say, wait a minute, maybe the way I've been seeing myself all this time is not actually accurate.
Wow.
It's not actually reflective of who I really am and who I want to be. And so then you take that with you out of the treatment, and then you work on the integration process, which are the therapy sessions in between treatments, where we learn and we teach our patients, our clients, how to take everything they've learned from these experiences so that they can learn how to heal themselves with the knowledge that comes from the medicine sessions.
Wow. So it's not scary for people. They're not like leaving their body and they're going to like jump off the roof or anything like that.
No, not in a clinical setting. No.
Okay.
No.
So what is it? So you said it just sort of feels like you're just kind of getting a different perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that all of these medicines are really perceptive and perceptual and perspective altering medicines. So as long as the environment that you're doing them in is a safe and trusting, carefully curated therapeutic environment, which is why we don't recommend the use of these recreationally, people have dramatically therapeutic experiences that radically transform their lives. It's not necessarily a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah.
It may take 6 sessions, but the point is that you curate the environment to complement the medicine.
But even hearing you say it's not one and done, it might take 6 sessions is like, what? It's better than like 150. Like, you know,
right.
Who cares if it's just just 6 sessions? And so you're saying in 6 sessions, there are dramatic results with depression, PTSD, all of this.
Yes. And particularly with depression, with ketamine, that's been the most widely studied. And we see people who go, I think the most interesting cases are when you see people who go from chronically suicidal, where they feel suicidal every day for as long as they can remember, to not feeling that way at all anymore for months at a time, right? From one dose. So that's really
wow.
Those are some of the more incredible findings that we see that are really transformative for people. And I think when you recognize that you have the ability to feel that good again and feel like yourself again, it helps you understand that you can access these states of feeling better on your own. And then we work with the client to teach them how to get there on their own. And that's kind of where Apollo kicks in, as Apollo is like a tool. Not everybody can access ketamine. Ketamine's expensive. It requires, all psychedelic medicine right now is pretty expensive. It's hard to access. Ketamine is the only legal one. Sometimes it's hard to find providers that know how to do the psychotherapy with ketamine.
Yeah.
So, things like...
Is it just with a psychiatrist, or can a therapist use it with a client?
So therapists can use it as long as there is a doctor or somebody with prescribing privileges in that state who is able to administer the medicine.
Okay.
So depending on your state, sometimes that has to be a psychiatrist, sometimes it could be a nurse practitioner. It just depends on the state you're in.
Got it. Okay. Sorry,
but most
didn't mean
of the
to
work,
interrupt you.
Oh, no, it's okay. But most of the work is done with the therapist. And I think the idea is that, getting back to what you were talking about when we first started, is the theme of what's going on in our bodies and our minds is that when we're chronically stressed or chronically mentally ill, we don't feel safe in our own skin.
Yes, so
and we
true.
literally feel afraid of ourselves, afraid to be ourselves, or afraid to know who we really are, because we've been taught that who we are might not be good.
Yeah.
And even, many, many people over the years have reflected on this concept, and even ancient tribal medicine and Western medicine, I think, can agree that we are innately good. We have a lot of goodness in us from the beginning. And Buddhism teaches this very, very nicely. And that we have the ability to access that goodness at any time, as long as we're willing to see it for what it is. And so, techniques like psychedelic medicine are foundationally so exciting and interesting, because they allow us to interrupt that normal thought process of I'm afraid of myself, to I feel safe with myself.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how and why soothing human touch works, and why Apollo works, is because these gentle vibrations were curated to be delivered through the wearable to help boost safety signals in the brain and the body that bring us back into that place of I'm okay with being here right now with me.
Yeah, that's powerful. Who would you say, and I want to talk about, I want to talk about the Apollo. I just want to finish with ketamine again, because I'm thinking people are going to be listening to this like, wow, is there anyone that wouldn't use ketamine? Is it like, if someone just has anxiety, and I'm with you, I think everything stems from some sort of trauma, like everything. I don't care if it's anxiety or if it's depression. What about someone that's like borderline personality disorder? What about someone that's bipolar? What about these kinds of things, like, or just generalized anxiety? Like, is ketamine for everyone or not for everyone?
I mean, there's no medicine that's right for everyone, or no single therapeutic technique necessarily that's right for everyone. Psychedelics, especially.
Hold on, I just lost you. You hear me? Wait, you there?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm still here.
It just died completely. No. It says my internet's unstable. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Nope, we're all good.
So
there it goes again. Okay, go ahead. You're good.
I could start over, but basically I don't think there's any psychedelic medicine or therapy that's right for everyone. With psychedelic medicines in particular, because many of them have what we call a dissociative effect, we'd never recommend using them in folks who have bipolar disorder or who have psychotic disorder. People with these disorders can have their symptoms worsen with psychedelic medicine. So we recommend not using them, or at least trying lots of other things before you work with a psychedelic medicine, and making sure you work with someone who's extraordinarily experienced with your condition. But in general, as a general rule, we do not recommend using psychedelic medicines with people with bipolar disorder or psychotic disorders or any variety of those disorders. Personality disorders are a really interesting one, because there's a lot of evidence coming out that psychedelic medicines can be extremely effective. And again, it's still early evidence, but we don't really have good treatment for personality disorder at all.
So true.
It's very difficult to treat.
So true. So true. That would be oh my God, what a gift if this started working for them, for people with a personality disorder. So of all of these, is ketamine, I don't know how to say it, like the lightest of them all, or because I know it seems like psilocybin is like kind of heavy, or am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of intensity of experience, it depends a lot on dose, and the environment that someone's in.
Okay.
So I would say that of the most gentle, ketamine and MDMA, and I would throw cannabis in there, if used properly, are amongst the most gentle of the psychedelic mind manifesting medicines that have the quickest on and off, so you don't you're not feeling strange for many hours. It might be at most 4 to 6 hours with these medicines.
Okay.
So for that, I think it gives people a little bit more comfort knowing that, with psilocybin and LSD, you could be, for lack of a better term, in an altered state of consciousness for 8 to 12 hours. Right?
Okay.
So that's a long commitment for a lot of people.
It's a long time. It's a long time for sure. I wanted to ask you something about stress, and I lost my thought now. What impact would you say chronic stress has on the body? I mean, I'm guessing all of these, again, help with stress, but I know you're a specialist or an expert with stress. I want to kind of segue over to the Apollo. So let's talk about stress on the body. And
sure.
Let's talk about sleep, because I have sleep issues, and I know I'm not the only one.
Definitely.
But this thing is saving me right here. So let's talk about stress and chronic stress on the body. What happens to the body? And I know about adrenal fatigue, but go ahead and talk about that too.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the most basic way to break it down is going back evolutionarily to what we were like when we're in the jungle or living in caves, tens of thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
So because these systems that we're talking about, the stress response system, which we call the sympathetic fight or flight or freeze response system, and the parasympathetic rest and digest and recovery response system, these systems are as old as we are. They're probably much older than humanity. They go way back into ancient mammals, and they're hardwired into our bodies. So when you think about these systems, it's critical to understand how they work so that we can then understand how we can influence them in positive ways. So one important example that I like to talk about is when, we're living in the jungle or in a cave and there's a predator around us. We want our sympathetic stress response system to turn on, and we want our blood and our oxygen and our resources in our body, our energy, to go to our lungs, our heart, our skeletal muscles, our motor cortex, our fear center of our brains, and to get us out of that situation right away to safety, right? What we don't want in that situation when we're running from a lion or a bear is for blood to go to our digestive system or to our urinary system or to our reproductive system or our creativity system. We don't want, or our sleep system, right? We don't want to be in a recovery situation when we're not safe. And so the body has a system that's highly structured that creates a dynamic interplay between these systems. So when stress happens, the sympathetic system goes up, it gets us, and our parasympathetic recovery system goes down until we get to a state of safety. And when we get to a state of safety, they re-equilibrate or come back to homeostasis. And then the parasympathetic recovery system is triggered by safety, which then turns on energy recovery. It turns on sleep. It turns on the digestion, reproduction, creativity, and all the things that we want, empathy, right? All the things that we want to have available to us when we are not in immediate threat. So now project that experience that we just talked about of running from a lion to emails and traffic and our families and our work and every little moment of our lives where we have now added responsibility that we have to keep track of. And think about how much energy is constantly getting diverted away from our recovery system, which is literally controlling our ability to sleep, as the example you brought up, right? And digest and absorb our food and restore our energy and function in a reproductive capacity and be empathetic with our loved ones and not irritable, right?
Yeah.
So over time, as we sap resources away from our recovery response system, that parasympathetic system, to favor our survival stress response system, then we create a disease state or a dis-ease state in our bodies that favors stress all the time, which takes energy away from all the things that make our lives good. And so that's why our sleep and all of these things start to dysfunction. So what all of the techniques that you and I have been talking about are focused on, like everything from deep breathing and meditation and yoga and good nutrition and exercise to psychedelic medicines to use in the proper way to Apollo, is that, and soothing touch, soothing music, etc., is that all of these techniques boost activity in the safety response of our bodies because whether it's biochemically or chemically through food or through psychedelics or other medicine, or whether it's through touch or music, this being able to take time to pay attention to these feelings, like someone touching us in a nice way, instantly sends a signal to our brains that says, if I have time to pay attention to this feeling of somebody touching me in a nice way, or the feeling of air coming into my body, then I can't possibly be running from a lion in this moment.
Oh.
And that's completely subconscious. It's completely beneath our awareness. And the more that we practice and bring it into our awareness, the more we strengthen the neural networks around safety. And then we teach ourselves that we can make ourselves safe, which is exactly what Apollo helps us to do.
Okay. We've not talked about the Apollo. So tell everyone what this, I'm going to call it ingenious. What do we call it? A wrist accessory, stress accessory? I love this thing. I wear it 24 hours a day. People thought it was an Apple Watch. I'm like, no, it's my Apollo. It's my lifever right here. Tell people, what is the Apollo? Where did it come from? Because it's amazing.
So I wear it all the time too, so you don't feel alone. Our whole team actually does, and we have thousands of users who do wear it all the time. And it's really exciting because what Apollo is it's one of the very first wearable therapeutic devices. So it effectively, we developed it at the University of Pittsburgh through my research on PTSD and chronic stress to stimulate the touch receptor system in a similar way to soothing human touch, or to feeling like somebody holding your hand giving you a hug on a bad day, which instantly sends safety signals to the brain that, as we were talking about earlier, says, if I have time to pay attention to this feeling, and I can't possibly be running from a lion or a bear. I have to be safe. And so what that does is, when our heads are all over the place, thinking about things from the past, thinking about things from the future, it brings us instantly back into the present moment in our bodies to help us be more calm and focused, which effectively helps facilitate what many people call flow, or peak performance or peak recovery states.
Okay.
And so the Apollo feels like a gentle, it's not like any vibration that you would feel in your normal life. It can be worn on the ankle or the wrist. I personally prefer the ankle. But we have people on both camps, and
does it matter if it's on the inside or the outside of the ankle?
No,
but just as long as it's somewhere around the ankle bone down there. Okay.
Yeah. It's just personal preference, wherever it's comfortable. It should be comfortable.
Yeah, I don't really notice when it's on my ankle as much, but I don't, at night when I'm sleeping, I love it right on my wrist.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's really personal preference. There's no one right way to use it.
Yeah.
And you can't overuse it because it's really just, it's music. And using what we did is we used the neuroscience of music and touch to basically curate music for your skin rather than for your ears that the body detects as safety signals.
I love
like
that.
Soothing human touch. So it feels very much like a cat purring on your body, or like somebody holding your hand, or like an ocean wave washing over you. And over time, it not only helps people feel calm under situations of stress in the moment, or focused, or whatever it is that your goal is, but there's 7 goal states, and they range from most energizing, which is energy and wake up, to social and open, which is great for social, being creative in groups or group work, giving talks, or just being social when you're tired.
What about like social anxiety?
And social anxiety.
Yeah, that was a good one. I thought I read that. Yeah.
I love that one. I have a little bit of anxiety, believe it or not, when I speak publicly.
Yeah.
And so I started using social and open and clear and focused when I would give any big public speech or talk in front of a lot of people. And it immediately took me out of my head, which was, I would find myself sometimes thinking, what are people thinking about me when I'm talking to?
Yeah.
I know what I'm talking about. That's why they're here. And it's really awesome. Like, it's that simple of a switch in mindset that helps us to come back to the moment and really access the fullest version of ourselves and really, get back to our full potential.
I love it. So I like that there's no side effects. There's only positive side effects, or I should say negative side effects, right? The only time that I get upset is when it runs out of charge. I'm like, oh, I got to take it off. But it really does help me sleep.
That's great.
For some reason, I started waking up at 2 a.m, which is why my husband, he just said, oh, I got you this thing. Excuse me. I said, what is it? And he goes, it's the Apollo. Just wear it tonight when you sleep. And I did. And I ended up sleeping. And I was like, what is this thing? He goes, listen to this podcast. I'm like, I need that guy on my show.
That's so funny.
So awesome, though. And I'm addicted. And I have to say, so it builds over time. Is that what you'd say? Because
the body gets more sensitive to it as you use it.
It's weird because I would say I've had it for probably I've had it probably the whole month of July now. Yeah. So probably 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. And, something stressful was going on. We just bought this house and something stressful happened. I was like, oh, it's okay. And they were like, what? Like, you're not stressed? I go, no. And then it dawned on me. I go, could that be from this?
Yeah.
I'm just like, really like, who cares? Big deal. It'll all work out. And they were like, that's not like you. And I said, they're like, you're not high strung. I go, no, I feel very relaxed, actually. I think it's my Apollo. So I love it. Absolutely love it.
I'm so glad you're having such a good experience. And
yeah.
It really does serve as a training tool. My specialty in psychiatry is addiction psychiatry. And, I appreciate that you are getting such a good experience with it. But the best part about it is that it doesn't facilitate dependence. It helps teach us, just like deep breathing, just like meditation, to be more mindful and present in the moment.
Yes.
And so over time, as we learn to feel safe in lots of different situations of our lives, we remember that we have that ability at any time in our lives, with or without the Apollo. The Apollo is a catalyst or a tool in our toolbox. It's not the end all and be all of our sanity.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I'm very really happy with it.
Exciting.
So that's why I'm glad to have you on. I love it. I loved it. Gosh, I have 3 pages of questions for you, but I know we're out of time now. So is there anything else? I know, it was so much fun.
Well, feel free to, let's do a few more.
Oh
if
gosh,
there's anything pressing.
So many. I mean, I don't want to, we're going to go off of like completely different tangents here, but let's see.
Oh, there is one thing I did want to mention, if you don't mind.
Please. I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, which one do I ask you? So no yes, go ahead.
So I think one of the things that's really fascinating about Apollo, and why I think it's a very unique wearable, and is that it really is the first wearable of its kind that allows you to see changes, not only subjectively, because, some of us, we put on something and we say we feel different. Some of us don't say we feel different. Some of us take a little more time than others to feel things and to feel the different change.
Yeah.
But what's really incredible about Apollo is you can measure it.
Yes.
So when we developed the technology, we put it through rigorous double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trials at the University of Pittsburgh. We have lots of other university groups studying it. Everyone's showing consistent results for physical and mental performance and activity and recovery, which is really exciting. We have kids with ADHD using it.
That was one of my questions. I'm like, tell the story about the ADHD, what you did in Pittsburgh. Tell that story. So good.
So I mean, we basically, so I was one of those kids growing up who had ADHD. My parents didn't believe in ADHD, so I was never medicated. But I always struggled with attention, believe it or not. And it was something that was probably one of my biggest challenges was, disciplining my attention. And so when we started using Apollo, one of the first frequency that we developed was the clear and focused frequency, which was what we started testing in our clinical trials. And we showed that it improved focus and attention, which resulted in up to 25% increase in accuracy on performance tasks under stress, which when you can imagine, like for me, I did okay on my SATs. If I could have had a 25% boost from a vibrating bracelet, you bet I would have been,
Exactly.
I mean, it would have been a godsend for me back then. I spent, hundreds and hundreds of hours studying for that test, and I still didn't meet my goals. So, thinking about that, I was, I started giving it to my friends in the prototype that had adult ADHD that were taking medication. And they came back to me over a couple months and said, I'm not taking my medicine anymore. This is working better for me than the medicine that I was taking. So then we started talking to some pediatric clinics that treat kids with treatment-resistant ADHD, which usually is often accompanied by autism or anxiety and sometimes depression. And these kids are very difficult to treat, and they have tons of behavior issues that make their families miserable and their teachers miserable. And none of their parents typically want to medicate them. They want something to help. And so we started giving it to these kids, and they had dramatic response rates. I think we've run about 30 kids so far in a clinic in Allentown, Pennsylvania, between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And we've seen that I think out of all 30, like 28 or 29 of them had 50% reductions in anxiety within an hour of use. And they have increased focus, decreased need for medicine. I mean, it's incredible. And so now we're actually working to get that through FDA trials for ADHD, which is very exciting. But to everyone else out there, who wants to measure their outcomes, if you're a biohacker or somebody who tracks your biometrics, sleep and heart rate variability are really interesting biomarkers because you can now track them with things like the Oura Ring.
I'm getting mine on Friday. It's coming Friday, my Oura Ring.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's great sleep tracker. And there's a lot of other ones out there too. But I really like that one in particular because I don't really like wearing things on my wrists when I sleep.
Same, yeah.
And so people have been using this and sending us their data. And we've seen within a couple weeks of using Apollo, we see time to fall asleep decrease by 20 to 50% within a couple weeks. We see REM sleep and deep sleep increasing by 20 to 50%.
That is what I need to measure because I'm not getting deep sleep right now, I noticed, because I wore my husband's Apple Watch a few times. I'm like, why am I not getting any deep sleep? That was very concerning.
Yeah.
So I bought myself an Aura Ring.
Yeah. So
I'm going to start measuring it.
Yeah. So you'll be able to track it and you can see nights with Apollo and nights without, and you can see what your differences are.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating. And what's also interesting is that deep sleep and REM sleep are particularly vulnerable states for us because we're not engaged in the outside world, right? We're actually very physically vulnerable. And in REM, we're actually paralyzed a lot of the time.
Yeah.
We can't move. So to be able to enter those states, we absolutely must feel safe. Right?
Yeah.
So having something on the body or sleeping with another person that we're comfortable and trusting, all of these things help us to feel safe enough to allow ourselves to enter these states.
So let me answer this question. Is deep sleep the same as REM sleep, or is deep sleep deeper than REM sleep?
It's different. It's a different state.
Okay.
It involves, I think we don't really understand sleep as well as we are, we could. There's a lot of work going on to understand these states better. Both deep sleep and REM sleep tend to correlate with feelings of better restfulness during the day.
Right. Well, and deep sleep does so many great things for your brain. I mean, we need deep sleep. That's why I was so stressed. I had to put my Apollo back on after I saw my husband's reading on when I wore his watch. I'm like, I didn't get any deep sleep for 2 nights in a row. Oh my God. So I put the Apollo back on to relax.
That's funny. But I should tell you, it's important to note that your wearables at home that you
Yeah.
use are not 100% accurate, and they do require some time to get used to you personally.
Yeah.
So if you wear your husband's Apple Watch 1 or 2 nights and it tells you you have no deep sleep, that might not be accurate because it's used to tracking him,
Yeah.
and
And
his
he gets
body's
like,
different than
he has
yours.
like a 99% sleep score every single night. Like it's insane. He gets huge deep sleep. I get, well, we'll see. I have my ring coming on Friday. So we'll see what happens
Yeah.
in my
Well,
deep sleep.
and the most important thing is not to judge yourself every night, but to really use it to trend.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
want to make sure that you're generally trending in a positive direction for these biometrics. We also see resting heart rate come down when people sleep with Apollo, which is really interesting.
Mm,
So resting heart rate, we know, is a very well validated indicator of health.
interesting.
So, having a lower resting heart rate is generally a good thing. And if you're
Yeah.
calmer when you go to bed and you get better sleep, you're probably going to have a lower resting heart rate. And we do see that. So
Yeah.
it's very exciting.
Science right now is so exciting. Like everything we talked about today is so exciting to me. Because I think our world is ready for all of this, from the Apollo to the psychedelic assisted therapies. Like we need these things because they're quick and there's no side effects. That's what's
Right.
crazy. It's like, anyway, so I hope people have learned a lot today from our talk. This was fantastic. And whether you want to go with a psychedelic sort of kind of thing or something like the Apollo that's very safe, you put nothing in your mouth or you smoke nothing or take nothing, you just wear it on your wrist or on your ankle. Try one of these because I shouldn't say that. Scratch that. I did not say that. Try the Apollo. And tell us where might people find you?
You can find out more about Apollo at apolloneuro.com, and I believe there will be a discount link in the
Yeah.
show notes for today's
Okay.
show,
Yeah.
and for everyone who all of your fans and listeners. And then if you want to reach out to me or learn more about my work, you can find me at drdave.io, which is my clinical practice website. And I also am on Twitter at Dave Rabin, and I'm on Instagram at Dr. David Rabin.
Dr. David Rabin. I'm writing all this down. Okay, perfect. Now, do you see clients actually to do the ketamine, or
I do.
You do. Okay, great.
And I also use Apollo in treatment quite a bit. Again, I think, as you were mentioning earlier, a lot of the medicines we're taught to prescribe to our patients have a lot of side effects,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Like thinking about antidepressants as one example, the most common side effect of SSRI antidepressants like Prozac or Zoloft is actually anorgasmia, or not being able to have an orgasm. When you think about
Wow.
somebody with depression
Yeah.
who's already not feeling good, and that's the most likely side effect that they will have, that is not exactly a good outcome. And it's not something that we should rely on as first line treatment if there are other things that we could try that don't have that degree of side effects.
Yeah.
So, I work on delivering the least invasive treatments possible with, interventional psychiatry and sort of technology complements to psychotherapy. A lot of practices, gratitude practices and techniques we use, complements of Apollo, different wearables, and things
Yeah.
of that nature. But yeah, there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of options that we have before we get to medicine. And we want to educate people, and we see that as our goal, to educate people as how to do this. I think relevant to you, Michelle, we also use Apollo in psychotherapy. So it's a great way when you have a patient who comes in with anxiety, or someone who comes in and they're really not feeling good, or if you are tired or anxious as the therapist coming into a session, we know that impacts the outcome of the session. And so whether I wear it or whether my clients wear it, or both, ideally, we can really improve the outcomes and the speed with which we can make big changes in treatment and in recovery. So it's been really exciting to see that progress over time.
That's awesome. I had a quick question. When we were talking about psychedelics. Do you find that, and I don't know if this is studied, I'm guessing it is I don't know where, but are the neurotransmitters affected long term? So if someone, let's say, is low in serotonin or low in dopamine or low in whatever, do you find after they do something like ketamine or MDMA or whatever that they have a greater increase in
So,
neurotransmitters?
so that's a great question. I think that there is a common misunderstanding about the way we think about neurotransmitters in the brain, which was propagated by pharmaceutical companies trying to
Mm-hmm.
sell serotonin reuptake inhibitors to people for depression,
Yeah.
saying that you have depression because there's an imbalance in your brain of
Mm-hmm.
serotonin, or
Mm-hmm.
too little serotonin in your brain.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is that it's nearly impossible to measure how much serotonin we have in our brains. It is extraordinarily difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't exactly know
Mm-hmm.
how much serotonin you have.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what you have before, what you have after. We know that if we boost serotonin in your brain in a healthy way, like
Mm-hmm.
with exercise, for instance, or with some cases with medication, that we can radically improve how you feel. But
Okay.
it's difficult to measure neurotransmitters before and after. If you look at the theory and you understand the theory of how these neurotransmitters work and how the body works, it is extraordinarily likely that there's a improved balance of these neurotransmitters that you mentioned, for everything from dopamine to serotonin to oxytocin, to endorphins, to natural
Mm-hmm.
opiates in our bodies, et cetera, that are the balance of these molecules is improved when we engage in healthy practices of lifestyle or healthy psychotherapy or healthy clinical psychedelic experiences done in the proper way. But it's very difficult to actually show that.
To measure that. Okay. I was just curious.
Sure.
Because I would guess the answer is yes, but who knows?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think, yeah, I think it's not necessarily more, it's more balance.
Yeah. Okay. That's
Yeah.
great. Another positive. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was awesome. Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Really appreciate you being here today. All right, everybody. That's all I've got for you today. I will be seeing you seated right here next week in the adult chair. And do not forget to go to the show notes at theadultchair.com/podcast, and you will get your discount code for the Apollo. All right. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you so much.